Jai Hind viewers, I am Sudhakar Dwivedi, Assistant Professor in Information Technology Department. Today I am going to discuss a very important topic in object-oriented programming with Java, that is methods and the constructors in the Java. So let's quickly see what is the constructor and the methods in the Java. So first we will see what is the constructors. So as we can see, when we are going to create an object, so first we write the class name, then reference variable, new operator, and then we call a special method that has the same name as a class. So we can just say the constructor is a special method and it is called at the time of the object creation, and it has the special name as its class. And what is the objective, what is the job of this constructor method is, the job of this constructor method is to initialize the object as soon as it is created. So Java allows us the object to initialize itself when it is created, because this method is automatically called when the object is created. So the constructor, we can define the constructor is a block of code that initializes the newly created object. A constructor initializes an object immediately upon the creation. That means as soon as the object is created, the constructor is called automatically and then object is initializes. And it is syntactically similar to the method. Have some differences, of course, but it is more or less syntactically similar to the method. We can say that it is a special method that has the same name as a class. So once we define the constructor, it is called automatically immediately after the object is created, before the new operator completes it. And as I have said, the constructor is syntactically similar to the method, but here I want to mention the constructor have no return type. That means even it doesn't have the void. So what is the rules of creating a constructor? So if we want to define a constructor, so first of all, that I have mentioned, the constructor is a special method. So this is the constructor. The constructor is a special method that has the same name, as a class. So as here, the class name is my class. So here is a special method. The name of the method is the my class. That means it is syntactically similar. It is just similar to the class name. So the first rule here is the constructor. The constructor name must be the same as its class name. And here we can see there is no return type. Here is return type is not mentioned. So a constructor must have no explicit return type. A Java constructor cannot be abstract, static, final, and synchronized. That means we don't need to mention any type of the return type or modifiers here. What is the types of the Java constructors? So Java constructors may be categorized into these types. It may be default constructors, no argument constructors, as we can see parameterized constructors or copy constructors. Let's quickly see what it means. So what is the default constructors in Java? So as we have said, constructor that has no parameters and it is automatically called when the object is created is known as the default constructors. But default constructor is invisible. We don't need to define, we don't need to write the constructors. So that means it is not visible and it is implicit in the Java. So and if we write the constructors with no argument, the compiler does not create the default constructors. Again, I am repeating, the default constructor is invisible. That means it is implicit in the Java and it is automatically created. We don't need to even write the constructors. And if we write a constructors with no arguments, the compiler does not create the default constructors. If we have not written, it will create a default constructors. So what is the job of the default constructor is to initialize the objects with the default values. Like if we have some integer values, it will be initialized with the default value 0. So there is a data types having some default values, and the objective or the job of the constructors is to initialize the object with its default value, right? So as we can see here, this is a class and the class name is main, and having two of the parameters, one of the type integer and another one is the boolean. So I have created an object of this class type. So object of this class is, I have created a reference and I have called a method, this one, we can see this is the same method as the class. So this method is called when we are creating the object. That means it is called at the time of the creation of the object. And the job of this special method is to initialize the object as soon as it is created. So that means the variable A and the variable B both are initialized with its default values. So the job of the default constructor is to initialize the object as soon as it is created with the default values. What is no argument constructor? So as I have mentioned, the default constructor is created by the compiler automatically. We don't need to write the constructors. That means it is implicit in the Java. And if we have written some constructors, so even without parameter, so it is not a default constructor. So it can be considered as no argument constructors. So here I have written a constructor and it has no parameter. Here we can see it has no parameter, but we have written the definition of it. We have written explicitly. So it is not the default constructor, it is the no argument constructor. So in Java, a no argument constructor, also called sometimes default constructor, if we don't define the constructor. I have mentioned, if we don't define the constructor, we can say it's a default constructor. It's a constructor that does not take any parameter. And its main purpose is to initialize the object with default values. So what is the default values I have provided? The objective of this constructor is to initialize with that values. Parameterized constructor in Java. So as I have mentioned, the default constructor and the no argument constructor. So default constructor is implicit in the Java. We don't even need to write that the code of that constructor. It is implicit. And we have seen the no argument constructor. That means no argument constructor have no parameters. But we have written the code of that constructor. What is the parameterized constructor? Now we can supply the parameters to this method. So a constructor that has parameters in which we can pass the parameters is known as the parameterized constructor. And if we want to initialize the field of the class with our own values, not by the default values. So that means when we use this parameterized constructor, when we want to initialize the object parameters with our own values, not with the default values, then we can use these parameterized constructor. So we can pass the parameters as of our choice. So we can pass the parameters of our choice of our own values, then we can use the parameterized constructors. So here we can see again we are taking the main class, and here is one parameter. The one variable is languages, right? So again I am taking the constructor. This is the method I am defining, and I have pass a parameter that will receive the language of the string type. So when we create the object of this type, we have passed these parameters. We can see. So when we created the first object, this main constructor passed the Java. So this Java will be received here, and the Java is then initializes to this variable. Again, we have created another object, then Python is received here, and then Python is initialized. So we can see here, this method is called upon the object creation. So when we create the objects, this constructor method is called with the parameter supplied. So this can be considered as the parameterized constructor. And the job of the parameterized constructor, again I am repeating, is to initialize the objects with our own values. That means the values of our choice. Copy constructors. So what is the copy constructors? So a copy constructor actually is used to create an exact copy of an object. That means whenever we want to just create the copy of the existing objects, we can use the copy constructor. And what it takes as a parameter, as we have seen in the previous example of the parameterized constructor, we want to initialize the values. So it takes the values as a parameter, but here we want to just copy the same object. So what it takes as a parameter? It takes an object of the same class as a parameter. because we want to create the same copy of the object. So what we need to pass as a parameter into this object? The object of the same class, so that it copies the parameters or attributes. So unlike the other constructor, copy constructor is passed with another object. In this type of the constructor, we are passing the other object, that means copies of the other object, which copies the data available from the past object to the newly created object. That means the new object that is created, that means copy of the object, all the data is passed into it. So we can see here, if we say, so this is the class employee, this is the class employee, and have two values, ID and name. I am defining a constructor. Here. So this one is a constructor that is receiving the values to initialize the ID and name. So first we have initialized these values, ID and name, with this parameterized constructor. Now when these values are initialized, we want to create the same copy of the object. So what we need to pass? We need to pass the object of the same class. So here we can see in the main class, when we have created the object, and we need to just pass the parameters, value of the parameters. So we need to pass this value, and this value is initialized to this parameterized constructor. Now we have created another object here, we can see, and what we have passed? E1. So E1 we can see is the object of the same class. So the object of the one class, is passed to the constructor, and it will create another object that having the same parameters. So what we have passed as a parameter? We have just passed the object of the same class, for which we want to create a copy. So we have passed the object. That's why here we are collecting the objects into the same type of the class. So we have received the objects in the E. That's why we are receiving the values through the object, then reference variable and ID, and then name. So as we have seen, in parameterized constructor, we have just passed the values, and in the no argument constructor, we have passed nothing, and in the copy constructors, we have passed just the object of the same class. Thank you so much for the today's class. We will see in our next lectures what exactly the methods and what are the some rules and regulations to create the constructors in the Java programs. Thank you so much.